Alright, good morning Rainy Math students. Today in this video I'm going to go over the answers to the Module 6 review that we are handing out to you guys today. Tomorrow, a reminder that we will have a unit test, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Number 1 simply says, which pair of lines shows the graph of the system of equations? So you'll notice we gave you two linear equations here, which obviously create a system of equations. So the first one says y equals negative 1/3 x minus 2/3. A reminder again that the number in front of the x is going to be our m. I'll put it here in purple. And then in green, I'll show you the b, which is the starting point, right? So the starting point is at negative 2/3, so it obviously has to hit, our line has to hit the y-axis on the negative side. So if you look down here, right, the only ones that intercept on the negative y-axis is going to be lines M and then line P. Seeing that negative 2/3, okay, is not more than negative 1. It's actually negative 0.66666 repeating. We can see here that this line that they are talking about is this one right here, and that one is line M. So if you look at our possible answers, if it doesn't have line M as in Mary, then obviously we can cross those out. So we are left between A and B, so we have to look at the second one to check to see which line that would be that they are drawing. So once again, if I look at my slope, and then again I look at my y-intercept, in this case the y-intercept is at 1/2. So which line crosses at 1/2? 1/2 is between 0 and 1. The only one that crosses is going to be this one right here, which we can see is line L. So our two lines are line L and line M, and in this case my answer is going to be letter B. So there's your answer for the first one. For number 2, they are giving us different types of graphs, and they are telling us to describe each graph by writing the number of solutions to each one of these equations, right? So a reminder once again, when two lines intersect, that means that they have one solution. So over here, I'm going to write one solution. When lines do not intersect, which means they are parallel, that means they will have no solution. And then last but not least, this one's kind of the one that confuses students a lot. They're like, well, I only see one line. Well, remember, it's the same line, so technically there is another line underneath it, but because there's only one line that is drawn, or it looks like there's only one line, then this one is going to be your infinite solution, because there is another line there. It just so happens to be the same line. For question number 3, it says the sum of two numbers is 65 and their difference is 5. Set up and solve a system of equations. Show your work. So there are two numbers. We don't know what the two numbers are, so we always use x plus y. Because they tell us it's a sum, notice that I use the plus sign here. And then they sum to, or they add up to 65. And then they also tell us that their difference, remember difference in math means the answer to a subtraction problem, it gives us 5. So when we do this, we are going to simply add straight down. And the reason why I'm adding straight down is because if you look at our coefficients, there's 1x up here, 1x down there, 1y up, and negative 1y down. Because we have opposites, a positive 1y and a negative 1y, if we were to add straight down, that's going to be using elimination. So those go away. 1x plus 1x gives us 2x's. 65 plus 5 gives me 70. Divide both sides by 2. We end up with x equals to 35. So there's your answer for the first one. Okay. Now remember, there are two numbers, right? If we know that the first number is 35 and they have to add up to 65, some of you guys are smart enough to know that the answer is going to be 30 for the second number. But in case you didn't know that, you can always plug it back into the equation. You take any equation you want, I'll take the first equation. That's the one that I find just easier to do. If you want to do the bottom one, sure, you can do that one as well. Okay. So in this case, what we do is we're going to replace the x value with the 35 that we got already. Okay. Instead of writing 1y, I'm just going to write y because it's kind of silly to write 1y. Subtract 35 from both sides. And then voila, when you actually subtract 65 minus 35, you get your 30. So your second number is going to be 30, as I had said about a minute ago. For number 4, solve the system of equations using elimination. So once again, we are going to need to eliminate. In order to eliminate, we're going to have the same coefficients. The only difference is that one of them needs to be positive, the other one needs to be negative. So you'll notice here, we are going to need to multiply one of these by a -1. So that way I have a negative and a positive. So I'm simply going to take this and just put it underneath. This gives me a negative 7x. This now gives me a positive 3y. This gives me a negative 4. When I add straight down, these will go away, the x's. The y's will also go away. So on the left side, you'll be left with 0. And then on the right side, we have 10 plus negative 4, or 10 take away 4, which gives me a 6. And then it's very obvious that the left side does not equal the right side. So when they do not equal each other, then we get no solution, which in this case is letter D. For number 5, it says, if the lines in a system of equations have the same slopes and different y-intercept, how many solutions does it have? So I'm going to create 2 equations here. I'm just making them up so that way you can see, because some of you guys are more visual learners. So it says they have the same slope. So you choose any number you want. I love the number 10. That's my soccer number. So I'm going to make both of these 10s, okay, the slopes. But then it says it has different y-intercepts. So I'm going to create an equation that has a different y-intercept. Make it nice and easy. So you'll notice the 10s are the same. Those are my slopes. The 9 and the 5 are my y-intercepts. Those are my starting point. So whenever you have the same slope but they start at different places, then these are going to be parallel lines, also known as no solution. So in this case, you have no solutions, okay? So that's your answer for number 5. There are no solutions. Number 6, determine whether the system of equations has no solution, one solution, or infinite number of solutions. Explain. So before we do anything, this first one is already in y equals mx plus b form, also known as y-intercept form. The second one is not. So before I do anything, divide by -2. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. And then I'm going to rewrite it up here next to the other one so that way you guys can compare. So then this becomes y equals, this is a 3 over a -2. The negative sign can go anywhere on top or on the bottom. It really doesn't matter. And then a -20 divided by a -2 gives you a positive 10. So we realistically no longer need these. We're just comparing those 2 equations. You'll notice that the slopes are different. The y-intercept is different, also known as your b. So when nothing is the same, we know that these 2 lines are going to intersect at some point, which means that it's going to have one solution. Okay, so number 6, the answer is one solution. For number 7, it says solve the system of equations using substitution, right? And then it gives us possible answers down there. So for these, very simple, okay? Whichever one says y equals or x equals, you're simply going to box and then circle. Okay, box and then circle. So then we use the first equation that they give us, and anywhere we see that y, we are simply going to box it, and then we're just going to substitute in the -4x. So it's going to look like this. The x stays as is, the 3 stays as is. You see that y there? I've already boxed it. We're going to replace it with the -4x. And then you just finish the problem, which is equal to 22. So we solve for this one. First, we start with our distribution, okay, or our multiplication. 3 times negative 4x gives me a negative 12x. Everything else stays exactly the same. For those of you who get confused, remember that there is an imaginary coefficient in here, which is a 1. So when you do 1x, take away 12x, that gives you negative 11x's. And in order to solve for our unknown variable, we are going to simply divide, we are simply going to divide both sides by a negative 11. And a 22 divided by a negative 11 will give me a negative 2. Okay. Now obviously we can continue. Okay. But if you look down, right, at our possible answers, the only one that has the x value as a negative 2 is not A, it's not C, and we obviously just got an answer for the x, which means it can't be no solution. So by using this thing called process of elimination, we can see that when x is negative 2, the y value will have to be 8. If you don't believe me, you can plug that back in and see for yourself. For number 8, these are the ones that we just recently did for homework last night. So we gave you a word problem. You have to create a system of equations and then, of course, solve. So this one says at a local store, 3 bagels and 3 cups of coffee cost $7.50. The cost of 3 bagels and 5 cups of coffee is $11.50. So first, we're going to need to write the system of equations. So for bagels, we are going to say that that's my x value. For cups of coffee, we're going to say that's my y value. And then we know that altogether this costs $7.50. Same thing for the bottom one. Bagels, once again, are my x. And then cups of coffee are my y. And then the total for that cost $11.50. So that's how you would set up the original problem. And then they're asking us, of course, to solve. Okay? So to solve, very simple. You can do a lot of different methods. In this case, we're just going to use elimination because that typically tends to be the easiest, seeing that everything is lined up for us, and it's one of the methods that we can use. Okay, so to use elimination, obviously, they have to be opposite coefficients. You'll notice that for my x's, the top is 3, the bottom is 3. So we are simply going to multiply one of these by a negative 1. I'll make my life easy. I'll do the bottom one by a negative 1. So when I do this, this would give me a negative 3x, a negative 5y, and now instead of a positive $11.50, now this gives me a negative $11.50. We technically no longer need that, so I'm going to scratch it out so it doesn't confuse anyone. And then as always, you add straight down. The x's will naturally go away. That's the reason why they call it elimination. 3y plus negative 5y gives me a negative 2y. And then more importantly, a $7.50 plus a negative $11.50 will give me a negative $4. You don't need to put 0.000 or 0.00, so I'm just going to leave it like that because it's easier for some of you guys to read. Divide both sides by a negative 2. A negative divided by a negative gives you a positive, so my y value in this case is a 2. Now remember, we found the y, which in this case happens to be my cup of coffees. So let's put coffee is $2. And then we still need to find the x value, which happens to be my bagels. So you take any equation you want. I'm going to take the top equation, which is the 3x plus the 3y, and that equals 750. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it. I'm going to substitute in my answer for y, which happens to be 2. So 3 times 2 gives me 6. The 3x stays the same. The 750 stays the same. I'm trying to solve, which means I'm trying to isolate that variable. So you subtract 6 from both sides. You end up with 3x is equal to $1.50. And then if you divide both sides by 3, then you end up getting 50 cents for the x. Remember, my 50 cents for the x is going to be, according to the original problem, is the bagels. So we're just going to simply say bagels equal 50 cents. So that's the front side. Continuing on to the back side, it says solve the system of equations by elimination. So once again, elimination has been one of the two methods of solving equations, solving system of equations. So for this one, remember, they have to be opposite coefficients. This one is clearly a 1, so make sure you put a 1 there. The y down here is a 1. No coefficients match, so we're going to have to multiply one of these. I'm going to go ahead and multiply the top one, okay? And then the opposite of a 6x would be a negative 6x, so I'm going to multiply this whole thing by a negative 6. I'll put my new equation underneath. This becomes a negative 6x, a negative 24y, and a negative 120. I can technically just scratch this one out so that way you don't get confused. You're simply going to add straight down because, of course, we are going to be using elimination. 6x plus negative 6x, those go away. 1y plus negative 24y gives you a negative 23y. And then 28 take away 120 gives you a negative 92. Okay? And then in this case, we're going to divide both sides by a negative 23 in order to get my y by itself. So those go away. We're left with y equals, and then negative divided by a negative gives you a positive 4. So there's your first answer. Okay? Always remember when you're solving these, you have to solve for x, you have to solve for y. So we come back in here, and then you just ask yourself, which one looks easier, which one do you want to use? I'm going to use the first equation. So I put x plus 4y equals to 20. Anywhere I see anywhere I see a y, I'm going to plug in my new answer, which happens to be 4. And when I solve this, you'll notice that I end up getting 16, and then I subtract that from both sides, and I am left with 4. Always please make sure you're writing your answers as an ordered pair, so the x value is a 4, the y value is a 4, so there's your final answer. Once again, for number 10, same exact process, right? For this one, we made it nice and easy for you. If you were to add straight down, you'll notice that the 2y and the negative 2y are already opposites of each other. So when you add straight down, those will automatically go away. This gives you a 9x. This gives you a 27. Divide both sides by 9. And then, nice and easy, this gives you a 3. Okay? Plug it back into whichever equation you want. I always like plugging it back into the top one. But in this case, some of you guys might be like, no, I'd rather do an addition one, so I'll do the bottom one, sure. It really doesn't matter which one you use. So 5x plus 2y is equal to 17. Anywhere you see an x, because that is my answer that I got down here, I'm going to simply plug in a 3. So when I solve this, you'll notice I'm trying to isolate my 2y, which means that I subtract 15 from both sides because 5 times 3 gives you 15. Those go away. I end up with 2y is equal to 2. Divide both sides by 2. You end up with y equals 1. Once again, always make sure that you write your answers in ordered pairs. So in this case, my answer is simply going to be 3 and a 1. For number 11, they want us to use substitution. So you'll notice that they both say y is equal to. So very simple. You box one of them, you circle the value for the y. And then for the other equation, anywhere you see a box, or when you box the y, you're just simply going to have to substitute it with the 2x plus 10. So it looks like this. 2x plus 10 is equal to 4x plus 2. Nice and easy. We put our line going down. Doesn't matter if you bring your x's to the left or to the right. I always tell my students to always take away the lower number of x's, which in this case is a 2x. So I subtract 2x from both sides in order to get rid of it. This leaves you with 10 on the left side. This leaves you with the 2x, and then we bring down our plus 2. In order to get the 2x by itself, subtract 2, you end up with 2x is equal to 8, divide by 2, and you get x is equal to 4. Once again, always remember we found our x value, yay, but now we need to find our y value. You use any equation you want. Most of the time I usually just use the top one, so we'll use the top one here. It says y is equal to 2x plus 10. Well, we just found our x value. We just said that it's a 4. So you'll notice that I'm just substituting it in here. So this gives you an 8, this gives you a 10, and then the last time I checked, 8 plus 10 gives you 18. Once again, please make sure you write your answers in ordered pairs. It makes it easier for me and my Mr. Rogers to see. So the x value goes first, that's the 4. Y value goes second, that's your 18. Okay. For number 12, it says tickets to a movie cost $9 for adults and $5.50 for students. There were 150 tickets purchased for a total of $1,105. The following situation models, and they want us to solve, and they want us to figure out how many adults and how many student tickets were purchased. So if you notice here, right, we are going to simply solve this using elimination, okay? So once again, opposite of a positive 9a would be a negative 9a, so I'm simply going to multiply this whole bottom part by a negative 9, okay? So this becomes a negative 9a here, this becomes a negative 9s, and then 150 divided by multiplied by negative 9 is a negative 1,350. So for the sake of making this easy for you guys to read, I do away with the little one, or the middle one, I should say, not the little one. And then we just add straight down. So the A's will go away, boom. And then for my S's, I get a negative 3.5 S, because I'm adding straight down. And then this would give me, what is that, this would give you a negative 245. Divide both sides by a negative 3.5. And when you do that and you use your calculator, and I highly recommend using calculator for this one, then you get 70. So the S stands for students. So obviously there's 70 student tickets that were purchased. If there was a total of 150 tickets that were purchased, then in order to find how many adults went, you simply do 150 minus 70 using a little bit of common sense. That will give you 80, so then that means that there was 80 adult tickets that were sold. So the A again stands for 80 adult. The S stands for 70 student tickets. Alright, and then last but not least, before the bell rings, there's the bell. I'm going to solve using elimination. So once again, I'm going to multiply this whole thing by 2. This gives me negative 8x, negative 6y, negative 10. I cross out the middle one once again. I'm adding straight down. You'll notice that in this case, the x's cross out, the y's cross out, and the number at the end crosses out, which means I'm left with 0 equal to 0. And anytime you get the left equal to the right, you get infinite solution. And then because I had an extra box here, when is the test? When is the test? Well, that's obviously going to be tomorrow, Friday. Study, please. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching the video. Adios.